Hey friends, it's Carl here with another Calm Survival, and today we're going to look at knife sheaths in a little bit more depth, just to give you a bit more idea of what you might be looking at when you go to buy yourself a knife for, your survival kit, or just, a more utility knife for whatever reason. If you're going to do anything more serious with it, where you have an activity that is going to require the knife, obviously use your knowledge of that activity in specific to hopefully help guide you a little bit farther. This is going to be a pretty broad overview. The first thing I want to talk about is materials. So in general, you're going to have leather or plastic. Now, leather is pretty good. It's pretty traditional, but it does require a little bit of maintenance, a little bit of care and feeding. So if you're just buying a knife to stuff in a pack, for forever from now, leather might not be the best choice. When it comes to plastics, you either have injection molded, like the three that I have here, or you have Kydex. Kydex is a thermoset plastic, which means you heat it up, you set it, you form it around the thing that you're wanting to form it around, and then you let it cool. As far as plastics go, it will start to melt again at a relatively low temperature. So within the realm of a hot car in a hot climate, or I've heard of cases even just desert conditions, being in the sun. But for most people, it's going to be pretty good. The reason it's important to think about that is that when it comes to leather and Kydex, the sheaths are basically made one at a time, pretty well by hand. And so the materials and the workmanship are where the cost comes from. Okay, so there's sort of a materials cost item. Something like the injection molding on this is really a design cost item. So you'll find injection molding with higher production number knives. Now in this case, with this Buck 119, yeah, it's a super common knife. They make a lot of these, but it's more traditional. It goes with the aesthetic. So when it comes to the material, that's the main thing. Now, some knives will have a nylon cover, but pretty much just like this leather sheath has a plastic liner on the inside. Really what you're getting is a simple plastic sheath with a nylon cover. Okay, so pretty simple stuff. The next thing is retention. How does the knife get held into the sheath? Now this one, it's pretty easy to see. And this one, even if the buckle is undone, the knife is sort of still held unless you really pull that out of the way. It's very common on leather sheaths for this to be a very thin strap. It's really easy to cut those off if you're not careful. I've had it happen to me a few times. And in general, with that little thin strap, if it sits too high up, the knife can actually be part of the way out of the sheath. It's still held in, but part of the blade can be exposed. And that's something worth considering. You can see that this knife doesn't have any rivets in the sheath, whereas this one does. You can also see that there's a big block of leather basically protecting those stitches from being cut. Same with this, it's a thinner piece, and so as the knife comes out, you're not as likely to cut out the side of the sheath. A cheap leather sheath or a cheap nylon sheath, that's definitely a risk. This one is just a friction fit, just grips around the handle there. The advantage on this one is that that's a pretty wide space. It would be easy to clean out. These other two, not so much. And these, it's simply just spaces in the molding that provide some tension You can barely see them, but it's just enough to provide some tension onto a feature of the knife to hold it in. They're usually pretty secure. Next, how are you going to carry it? Now, let's say that we don't just want to throw it in a pocket or in a pack. We're going to wear it. Some of these knives are going to give us pretty well one option, and it may be tempting to try to go for all of the options and get as multifunctional of a sheath as possible. The downside can be that might mean you end up with a sheath that does a lot of things not well at all. Or you end up with a sheath that's expensive. Now, I have a pouch here that on the back has this webbing. May look pretty familiar. It's Molle, M-M-O, or M-O-L-L-E, or PALS webbing. They're functionally identical. And basically, you take another strap, weave it through, weave it around the webbing straps on whatever you're attaching this to hold it on. You can get knife sheaths with this as well. Very often, though, they will also have the belt loop. Not always, because attaching this to a belt is kind of challenging. It doesn't work out nearly as nicely as you'd hope. Obviously, if you're going to carry something on your belt and then carry a pack with a waist belt or carry a waist pack of any sort, it could get in the way. So you'll often see a belt loop and either a ring or another piece of cord or something, just to allow this to hang a little bit below the person's belt so that it just keeps things a little bit easier. How you do that is entirely up to you. How low you want that to hang, obviously, how much it's going to swing around is going to be a factor. Now, if we look at where this belt loop sits, this knife is going to sit fairly well below somebody's belt anyways. This one is going to sit a little bit higher up. This one higher still. And this one, if we use the cord in this orientation, or move it so that it's covering over those holes vertically, we're actually going to be sitting way up there. Now, that can be good, that can be bad. If it's jabbing you in the ribs, it's bad. You'll also notice this is the only of these knives that really allows for a left-handed carry. You can just adjust it to whichever way you need. That can be a really good option. Or you can get this, one of these sheaths made the other direction. Or in the case of this one, just turn it around. Sometimes simpler is better. I mean, out of these, this is probably the cheapest sheath, production cost-wise, and it's also the cheapest knife. And it just kind of puts things into perspective. Other ways you can carry a knife, it's pretty common, was more common a few years ago, is to just have it on a string around your neck. But if you've ever worn a large necklace or a heavy pendant, this thumping against your sternum is kind of inconvenient, and every time you lean forward, having it swing out in front does annoy a lot of people. And you will see a couple of wilderness experts who that's their style, that's how they roll, and that's what works for them. With something like this, however, you can also take this cord, attach it around either your belt or your belt loop, drop the knife in your pocket, and by adjusting the cord, you could have that sitting upright inside your pocket nice and easy. You need your knife, you reach in, just push the sheath off like you normally would, or if you need it in a hurry, just give it a yank. The sheath will stay attached to you so you won't lose it, but you have the knife in your hand, which is definitely another option. So really what we want to be looking at is, did they spend the time on the design? Did they spend the time on the materials and the manufacturing? Did they spend it on both? Out of all of these, this is almost certainly the most expensive overall of the sheaths. And the reason that this one is done in injection molding is they were able to reduce the cost over the entirety of the big production run. But in this knife's category, a lot of manufacturers are going to be making Kydex sheaths because they're not producing them in the numbers that they need to justify it. So that's a little bit of why some of those decisions can get made. Again, there's nothing wrong with tradition. You just have to know what you're getting into. One last detail, when it comes to fire steel loops or little pouches, I haven't found them super helpful. If you find that that is something that you need, then go for that. But if you aren't sure, I find that more often than not, as you can see, none of these knives have one. I have had knives in the past with them and have not found them to be as beneficial as I originally thought. So that's just me, but in my opinion, they're often not worth it unless they have a very specific purpose and you have a very good idea of how you are going to use it. Otherwise, it's just added bulk, complexity, and cost. So I hope that helps a little bit more. I know the other video was really short, but hopefully that gives you an idea of what you're after and what you want. I've been Carl. This has been Calm Survival, and we'll catch you next time.